Good afternoon, everyone. Let's get started. And I'd like to introduce the guests who are with us today. First of all, Christopher MIDURA, who is a public affairs officer at the American Embassy in Warsaw, and who will take the floor in a minute. And he's accompanied by two people from the embassy. Keisha Lafayette is Deputy Cultural Attaché. Would you mind introducing yourself? I didn't get your name. From the cultural section. Right. And then we also have MARIUSZ KURC, who's actually responsible for organizing this panel and will lead it. And he's the editor-in-chief of Replika, which is a bi-monthly LGBT review. And we have PAMELA WELLS, who is an activist and someone who was on the board, of the editorial board of Replika for a while. And KRYSTYNA, whom I think you know, who's of course a colleague of mine here at the American Studies Center, Dr. MAZUR. And this is an annual event, and this event is reflecting the fact that the U.S. Embassy has been financially supporting, and also supporting by facilitating contact and so on, for supporting the publication in the Replika of articles which are devoted to LGBTI rights in the U.S. and also elsewhere, but in connection to the U.S. The American Studies Center and myself, we are sort of involved as academic advisors to some extent, although I must say that MARIUSZ KURC is capable of doing this on his own. In fact, he has been very, very independent, of course, in the editorial work. And we have this panel here every year to mark the publication of a number of articles. I think there's about 36 pages of articles this year in the 6 issues of Replika. So this is the occasion, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. MIDURA, who will say a few words to us.
Hi. Nice to meet you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Tomasz. Thank you, MARIUSZ. I really appreciate the invitation. I'm glad to be here and have the opportunity to address you today. My name is Christopher MIDURA. I'm the Consul for Public Affairs at the U.S. Embassy in Warsaw. On behalf of Ambassador Jones and my colleagues at the U.S. Mission, it is my pleasure to open today's discussion on LGBTI in America and at the American Studies Center. I'm very glad to be here for today's event, and I'd like to offer our special thanks to the panelists who have agreed to share their expertise on this topic today. I'm very glad to see some students here to continue the discussion about LGBTI issues in the United States and worldwide. And I hope you've all had a chance to read some of the articles in Replika magazine. I encourage you to contribute your comments and opinions to today's discussion as well. Diversity is one of America's greatest virtues. It's a major source of our national strength, and it's one of the things I'm proudest about of my country. Our Constitution protects and promotes diversity, and the drafters of that document gave special attention to protecting the rights of minority individuals and groups. They realized that while the majority rules in a democracy, it must do so within legally prescribed boundaries that protect the human and civil rights of others. While we in the United States certainly haven't always lived up to our ideals to protect the human and civil rights of minorities, slavery and our historical treatment of Native Americans are two rather obvious failures in this regard. And even James Madison, who wrote the Federalist paper that was about the rights of minorities, was himself a slave owner. The ideals themselves are nonetheless important, and their achievement remains an ongoing process. It's sometimes a long, slow, and frustrating process with many setbacks, as it is always easier for people to oppose change than to embrace it. But democracy requires consensus, and consensus for change is not always easy to obtain in a large country of many millions of people. I'm sure you've seen that yourselves in Poland. That said, sometimes social progress can come startlingly quickly, and that has fortunately been true with LGBTI rights in the United States over the past few years. This year marked a major milestone for LGBT rights in the United States with the Supreme Court's sweeping ruling in June legalizing same-sex marriage nationwide. But public opinion on this issue had already changed quite significantly by that point. And even though the United States has made great progress with regard to guaranteeing equality under the law for LGBTI persons, it remains an unfinished issue. Discrimination in employment against LGBTI people is still legal in many states, and certain American political and religious leaders continue to vociferously oppose guarantees of LGBTI equality as somehow conferring special rights on one minority group. We hear this claim also from many foreign leaders as a justification for prejudice, and in some cases repression directed against LGBTI people. President Obama eloquently advanced the case for equality in his 2015 LGBT proclamation. He said, "We are not truly equal until every person is afforded the same rights and opportunities. When one of us experiences discrimination, it affects all of us. And our journey is not complete until our lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender brothers and sisters are treated like anyone else under the law." End quote. In keeping with our commitment within the embassy to promote democratic values and rule of law in one of our best partners and allies, the U.S. Embassy is proud to support initiatives and projects such as today's LGBTI discussion, which raise awareness and foster an environment of diversity and inclusiveness. I look forward to our continued cooperation in the future and encourage the development of student or faculty initiatives promoting diversity. If you believe that we might work together on such projects in Poland, we would be very glad to hear from you. Let me then commend and thank the Replika Foundation, the American Studies Center, and LGBTI activists throughout Poland for promoting LGBTI equality under the law and Polish society. LGBTI rights are human rights. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoy the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I'll just give you the last Mariusz to play the host.
Yeah, okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so let's get to the topic. As Mr. MIDURA mentioned, the most important, I think, the most important day for LGBT community in USA within last 12 months was 26th of June, right? Here it was afternoon, so it was the morning in USA, and the Supreme Court ruled that the ban on same-sex marriage, which still existed in several states, is unconstitutional. Therefore, legalizing same-sex marriage in each and every state of USA. So, for some people, it marked somewhat the end of the fight. But as Mr. MIDURA pointed out, it's not the end of the LGBT movement, because there are things to fight for, like, for example, discrimination in employment. So, Pamela, the first question would be for you. You are the American girl living in Poland right now. First of all, would you like to get married with your Polish girlfriend in America, now that you can in every state?
Okay, I'm a bad American. I haven't. Just to be clear, like I'm from California. I lived 12 years in England, and I lived 8 years in Poland. So in some ways, I'm a little bit separate. I go back every 2 years, but I kind of have a foot a little bit in 3 countries. So if I were to get married, first of all, I would prefer to have civil partnership in Poland. That's what I would like. To have some legal protection in the country where I live and plan to stay. Probably, I think it's great that there's marriage possibility in the States. But even still then, if I'm looking at civil partnerships, then I could in California, if we wanted to move there. But I'm more likely to get married in Scotland or something, because there's no necessity for to live there. You can just go to Scotland and get married and go back, and at least on paper,
So for you, it wasn't such a breakthrough.
Of course it is. Of course, it's not that. I mean, I think it's amazing. It was a landmark issue. That it's and very, very important. That opened a whole other floodgates of backlash.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so the discussion continues. I think it's very, very important, and I'm really happy. I personally am not the hugest fan of marriage,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean, like, I'm also not a huge fan of other things, but it doesn't mean that I don't think that everyone should have the right to do it if they want to. So that's...
Tomasz and KRYSTYNA, did you expect it to happen so quickly? I mean, 46 years after Stonewall, and just 11 years after the first legalization in the states of Massachusetts, right? Massachusetts was the first one in 2004. So it's just 11 years. So we've been trying to legalize civil unions in Poland for 12 years now, and we haven't succeeded. And USA has succeeded to legalize same-sex marriage in every state within the same time.
Better with the general picture, I always get involved in details.
So the question is, did I expect this to happen?
Yes, to happen so quickly, yes.
Well, yes and no. I mean, in the end, it has been kind of course, it's kind of astounding when it happens. You don't know that this will happen right now. Well, of course, it comes as a kind of breakthrough in that sense. But on the other hand, I guess I didn't perhaps think in 2004 that this would happen in within 11 years. I don't think I had a kind of clear timeline in my head at all. In fact, at that moment. But what I did think would happen was that there would be a decision by the U.S. Supreme Court that would at some point make it legal, for people, or make it necessary to recognize marriage across state lines, simply because people move. And so once you have several states that introduce marriage, given that people don't just stay put and remain in the state where they got married, that becomes a kind of exigency, let's say, a kind of practical and legal exigency for something to change. And I think this is also true of the EU, by the way.
The support for same-sex marriage got to 50% in May 2012, exactly in the month when President Obama said he supports same-sex marriage. And since that time, it has been rising, and it now reached even over 60%. But when you take the people your age, between, I think, 19 and 29, the support is overwhelming. It's like over 80%. So basically, every young person in America, almost every young person, supports same-sex marriage. It's not the example. It's not the case in Poland, and it didn't used to be the case in USA just a couple of years ago. So what happened? What happened with the young people in America?
Well, I guess it's partly what you just implied, the fact that the marriage, same-sex marriage, was legalized. I think that this gives same-sex couples legitimation that they didn't have earlier. But I think that, going back to your first question, I'm much less comfortable being the specialist and kind of looking at the large picture, but I think I completely agree with what you said, and I think that another breakthrough that we need is that there's the assumption that once this happened, everybody will want to or has to get married.
That's why my question was kind of provocative to Pamela.
Yeah. Well, of course, there's the issue of the civil unions and the fact that marriage is a very problematic patriarchal institution, and that being in a situation when you have legal rights as a couple is one thing, marriage is another. I just talked to a friend of mine who lives in England and who's been raising her daughter in a very, very open-minded way, and complaining about social institutions, and then their neighbors got married to women and they had to go to the wedding, and the daughter says, "Mom, but we hate marriage. And she said, no, this time it's okay, this one. So it causes a kind of double, ridiculous, of course, double standard. And a number of people would argue that it is a type of assimilation into a system which we don't identify. So I think that there's a lot to be said in addition to what you said.
Yeah, I know the gay couple living in England, 2 guys, and they have Muslim neighbors, and they have been together for 5 years, and the Muslim neighbors say, "Oh, just please get married already." Well, 5 years without marriage?
It's indecent.
It's indecent, so just get married. Okay. So what would be next for LGBT movement in America after legalizing same-sex marriage? Apart from the fact that we already said about discrimination in unemployment, what's the next thing to fight for?
Trans people rights, especially trans people of color. I think they are such objects of violence still that it feels like it will take forever to actually.
Well, as far as hate crimes, because you mentioned trans women, you mentioned trans women of color?
No, trans people.
Trans people in general.
Particularly trans women and trans women of color.
Yeah. As far as hate crimes go, the American system as well as the British system has already divisions. So when they collect data regarding hate crimes, they collect data regarding gay men, gay women, trans men, and they know which group is the most discriminated against, which group is in the most dangerous situation. And it's trans women, and it's the trans women of color. And here in Poland, we don't collect hate crimes based on, motivated by homophobia. So we don't know any statistics in Poland. And the few cases that we know about concern gay men. So, but trans women in Poland, we don't know anything about the level of danger in which they live. And in USA, the data shows that this is the worst. The worst case is the most dangerous.
Of what's being reported, even.
Of what's being
Of course,
reported.
it's always like what is reported.
Yeah. And at the same time, within this year that we are talking about, 2015, we've got the fantastic case of Caitlyn Jenner. The case of visibility that America, I think, hasn't seen before. So it's like, in terms of visibility, it's like Anna Grodzka in Poland in 2011 or 12. So do you think the rights of trans people will be moving forward in the future? Sure. Do you want? Yeah. Okay.
Well, first I would definitely add Laverne Cox and Jazz Jennings to this list.
Yes.
Laverne Cox is the trans star of Orange is the New Black, who also has been just everywhere. And Jazz Jennings is a teenager who is the face of Clean and Clear's ad campaign. So, a transgender teenager is the face of an ad campaign. Yeah. Those two issues also are like, and also Laverne Cox is African American. So it's like also, okay, Caitlyn Jennings already was famous, is white, super rich, Republican. So it's interesting to have these three different...
Republican, yes.
Yes, oh my God.
Also Republican.
Still Republican. So yeah, but for me I would say that transgender visibility for sure has skyrocketed because still Orange is the New Black might be a niche TV series, cult but niche, and maybe not everybody seeing Clean and Clear, the ads, you would have no idea that Jazz is transgender, right? So unless you've heard the discussions around it, then that's part of what's so cool about it is she's just a teenager. She's a beautiful teenager who has great skin, right? But Caitlyn Jennings, this is also like household name. Every soap opera out
Yes.
there
Yeah.
in America. So trans visibility, I think, it's done a lot for trans visibility, for sure, especially amongst people who would not even be interested and in fact avoid this topic. But whether that equates to rights, I don't know.
I don't think it equates to rights, but I think that, well, I agree with what KRYSTYNA has said about how, how the legalization of marriage would then produce more support for marriage. This is how, sort of laws work as this kind of often work as this kind of normative model. But in another way, and over a longer period of time, what has produced this change is also visibility, and visibility in the media, visibility in in film, TV series, etc., and also for specific people coming out as lesbians and gay men. And so naturally, that kind of translation from visibility to rights hasn't necessarily happened for the transgender at this point. But it seems clear to me that in order for that for this recognition in terms of legal recognition in terms of rights to even take place, one needs to be able to kind of understand why those rights are necessary. And visibility is about that. It's not just a person. I mean that is a step, but I mean the point of it really is to understand what kinds of issues those people are tackling.
Yeah. Well, and just like same-sex marriage, at least a little bit, it redefines marriage in general, and it maybe just in a little bit sense, but still, I think it a little destroys the patriarchal image of marriage, just a little bit maybe, and maybe analogically, trans issues make you wonder even more about how things would change. I mean, I myself started to think about do we really need gender marks in our IDs? Why do we need them? And it's trans issues that made me think about them. And I myself came to the conclusion, okay, we don't need that. I don't have to have M for male put in my IDs. Why? It's useless. Especially when same-sex marriage is already not in Poland, but in the USA. So actually, can anybody tell me why do we need gender in our IDs?
Well, maybe because some names from foreign countries like Serbia or Croatia, when you hear such a name local, you don't know whether it's a male or female.
So
well, you don't have to know.
Well,
why do you need to know that?
I don't know, if you find ID on the street,
Yeah.
yes, and maybe the police officers need to find a tourist or someone. No, it's somehow helpful to find such a person.
No, but maybe. Yeah.
So you're not arguing that gender categories are altogether unnecessary. You're arguing that they shouldn't be on official ID.
Yeah, just that, there are Greece. Just several years ago, Greece had your religion in IDs, and they threw it out. But they did have it, and.
But this is something that the feminists have been fighting for.
Yeah.
Well, in the US, probably right from the start in the 19th century, but in a sense, what you're talking about is patriarchy and gender inequality, and it's necessary for the patriarchal system to preserve the distinction between men and women. So it's
that's why I'm saying that
this hasn't happened. And actually, another thing that hasn't happened is I can imagine that there may be a lot of change in terms of transgender people, but there's continually very little change in terms of people of color in the United States, which is not something that we're quite aware of the scale of that in Poland, because we're totally homogenous. And the one moment where there could be some change, when we could take in some refugees, we became monsters and kind of sealed our borders. So I think it's something that we don't have a clue about as a nation. But in the United States, it seems to me I wrote in this article that I wrote for Replika. I was in the US for the 4th of July, and there were, these celebrations because same-sex marriage was legalized on the 26th, and at the same time, there were massacres in black churches in the South. Fred of that said, who's the 4th of July for? And it certainly wasn't for black people at the time. So I think that the issue of color is for people of color, it's weird.
Yeah. And you're also talking about the racism within the LGBT community.
Well, that too. That is, I think, I know New York is a large city, so probably it's not for me to say much, but but it's still, come to think of it, when I was in New York, I was lucky because there's this festival of queer films, where every day a film was taken to a different neighborhood, and there were different films shown, and I've seen that those were very segregated. I think that the screenings in terms of the audience, but then most of the communities that I was part of were not. So I really don't be able to answer.
When I was in USA this year, I had a lot of meetings with LGBT activists, and actually I noticed that in most cases they were white LGBT activists, and when they were asked about the racial diversity in their own organizations, they would always say that they are struggling, but there is racial diversity in their organizations. But when we had meetings with LGBT activists that were black, and when they were asked the same question about diversity, they were telling a little bit different story. They were saying that it actually is it's a terrible struggle to find a real diversity within LGBT organizations. That the position of black LGBT people is disadvantages. Would you like to add something, Pamela?
I agree. We started off talking about kind of gender markers.
Yeah.
I would also say transphobia within the LGBT community is also a real and strong
Yes.
issue. So yeah, sometimes just because it's like the LGBTI community is a myth, just like feminism is a myth. There are LGBTI communities, just like there are feminist communities, or people. About the issue with do we need gender categories anymore? Because Mariusz gave me the questions before I cheated, and with this one, I was wondering why.
Today, not like 2 weeks before.
Well, okay, so and because of this, then I was kind of wondering why this question about why this interest. And so I was talking with Victor Janarski, who is the head of Transfuzja here in Poland, but he's also very international, right? So he travels a lot.
Yeah.
And because I thought, oh my God, is this a hot topic in the trans community that I hadn't heard of? That there's a push to kind of get rid of gender identification. I did know because it's also important, I think, to clarify this, gender as a legal category, like something that is on your birth certificate, that's on your driver's identification.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've had a driver's license in the US, but I think there still is your hair color and your eye color also, So that's also my eyes, I used to say, were hazel, and now they look kind of blue. So, plus hair is a whole other thing. And, you get a picture taken and your hair is like this, or, these things that are the legal category, the idea of the legal categorization.
For you to be recognized more easily.
Yeah, I suppose it's like, when either somebody finds your ID on the street, or if you're found unconscious and the police call, right, I've got a white male, approximately 30, blonde, blue hair. That's some of what it's
Okay,
for.
so yeah.
Right? That's some of what it's for.
So you were right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
However, when, for example, intersex kids are born, because they want to know whether to mark F or M. Until this point, and still I'm not sure there's like legal battles going on, the doctors would, without consulting the parents even, decide which part to cut off in order to tick that box, because it was too hard. Because first of all, at least in the States, there's not a third category. You know, in some countries there is a third category. So, you know,
in Germany,
like,
for example,
or in Nepal for sure. I think.
In Nepal, for
like,
sure.
So I mean, in some places there's more than one category. So that just as a thing to keep in mind about what does your legal gender, you know, who cares? Why is it just for identifying later? That's one issue. And also, for example, like when right now, I don't know, I think in the States it's not, but in many countries, for when someone has gender re-identification, then particularly if it's a trans man, they are required to be sterilized because it's too much for someone to think that someone with an M on their legal identity could have a baby. Because someone who is legally a male can still have their uterus and still have a baby.
And that's the case in
And
Poland.
and that's the case. So there's, you know, there are a few you know, legal men who've had babies, particularly in the States. But in many countries, I think even now, including in Sweden, it's legally necessary to be sterilized in order to have gender re-identification. So those are some things that, like, many people within the trans community are like, fine, get rid of it. But at the same time, it's interesting because the idea of gender as a social construct, first of all, is not something we're going to get rid of. And in order to make it so that you get to decide instead of someone deciding for you, you know, Facebook last year came out with 51 different categories you can check. I have to say I haven't actually seen them very much being used, but you know, I was inspired by this as an idea. And now the Oxford Dictionary is going to be adopting MX instead of like Ms., Mr., Miss. They're going to add MX, which is usually pronounced like mix. So that you know, again, if like, and again, first of all, said, well, why do we need Miss, and again, it's about patriarchy. Because it was Mr., you have the power. Miss, you're not married yet. Mrs., you belong to something. And Ms., oh, you're one of those scary feminists, you know, or maybe lesbian. So again, now with this kind of MX category, unless like everybody started using this, then it's like, you know, also like, why do we need these things? But to just, so these are my thoughts about gender.
I was also looking at, I saw an article, and I don't remember where it was, but they were talking about pronouns. And using he, she, and now there's going to be possibly an X or a ZE or...
she, like X, Z, H-E, or she, she... And this is widely in use in the transgender community and the transgender and allied community. A lot of people might say, well, how do you wish? A lot of people use they, right? Because
her is becoming their.
There, and it's easier to do that in English. You can do that in English. In something like Polish, which is a totally gendered language, it's a lot harder. But you know, to say they, and usually it's like, you know, people might ask, what do you prefer as your pronoun? How do you prefer to be, you know, called? So.
During my meetings in USA, when we were like 30 people from different countries, and there were, of course, always a lot of Americans with us, so they would introduce themselves by saying, hello, I'm Mark, and I go by pronouns he, him, his. So then we would, you know, incorporate this system, and I would say, okay, hello, my name is MARIUSZ KURC, and I go by pronouns him, his, or, you know. And it was like the routine for every meeting. Would you like to add something regarding same-sex marriage or trans issues or anything that we've talked about so far? Yes?
I'm wondering, what do you think about cisgender actors and actresses playing transgender characters? Because I remember there was kind of a huge controversy when Jared Leto played a transgender woman. And on one hand, I think that it's important there is more exposure of different genders and people, of different genders and sexualities, but on the other hand, there are many talented transgender people who could take this role. So.
What do you think? Tell us what you think, because it's such a good question. I'm sure you're
Well,
thinking something.
I think it's acting, so it shouldn't really matter because there is a lot of gay men and women who play straight roles, but there is also a lot of straight men and women who play gay roles. So I don't really know what's a good answer to that.
I think another answer is kind of social constructionist answer in the sense that at some point I know it's become kind of fashionable for heterosexual male actors to play gay men. It was like the kind of role that they wanted because it was cool, it was sexy to do that. And clearly it's not. And brave, yes. And clearly that's not the case for trans characters quite yet. So that's another kind of way of looking at it in terms of the social norms and expectations and what's available as the new sexy thing to do or be or talk about. One thing about language, I have to say, this is the one nice thing about Poland, that in Polish, as you said, the endings and the grammar and language is totally gender-coded. I don't know what we're going to do with that. But the thing is that, for example, plural endings, if there's a mixed group of men and women, are always masculine. So you can't, if there were like 50 women and 1 man, we still would need to use the male ending. Yeah. And there I know a lot of both women and men who started using female gender for both men and women to kind of reverse. Not even double in the sense suggesting that there's both men and women, but simply feminine. Yeah. Which is, I think, is so neat. Yeah. I wanted to share this.
Going back to the movies, have you seen the movie Tangerine?
Yes.
Okay. It's in the movies since Friday. It's an independent American comedy starring 2 transsexual ladies in the roles of transsexual ladies. And it's the first film of such kind that reached, at least, that reached Poland, right?
And the whole film is shot on an iPhone, all of it.
And it takes place on Christmas Eve in LA. So, and it's a really hilarious comedy. So go and see it. I've already seen it. Did you like it?
I loved it. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. So I think it's the future. That there will be more, because for now, if you're transsexual, basically you can't be an actor or an actress. Or transgender, like you're a band, that's not the profession for you.
Well, except for the examples that people
except just few examples, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, another kind of similar example. You guys know Glee, the series Glee? There's a guy in a wheelchair. And again, the question was like, is he disabled? Actually, he's not. And again, it's like, why didn't you get a disabled actor to do that? And of course, there's some discussion around that. And it's like, some of it is because, unfortunately, there isn't a lot of, so far, there hasn't been a lot of support to help disabled people who want to act to get them there. So it's great that people are asking the questions because it brings up this situation. It's like, okay, well, transgender people face, from the moment they're born, and the gender dysphoria affects people in such a severe way, especially when they're little. First of all, for someone to have the confidence to go into acting school and the support from their parents. So far, the problem, unfortunately, is that usually transgender people are spending so much time and energy wondering why they don't feel right in their body, that they're not going to probably usually get to acting school yet, right? A couple generations, hopefully that's all different. It's the same thing also with disabled acting. The same thing with, so.
Yeah, but I mean, those are in a sense 2 separate arguments, at least potentially. One, I'm all for people who are transgendered or disabled, as well as perhaps other sort of minority subjects to entering the profession of acting and other professions and being supported in this and so on. That's one question. The other question is, do we really want to say that it is somehow better for example, for gay actors to have parts of gay men and for lesbian actors to have the parts of lesbian women? I think that identity politics has limits here that we don't necessarily want to. So, I mean, there's certainly a kind of a sense of someone said that it's all acting anyway, but there's also a kind of sense of solidarity. You know, if you get a straight actor acting the part of a homosexual character. So I think that we don't want to necessarily go all the way in that direction.
I wasn't suggesting
Of course not.
There's also, you know.
But you know, at the same time, the policy so far is that if you have a great role of a gay man, you hire a straight actor. Because, he will be acting. You can't hire an openly gay actor because people would say, well, he won't be acting, he will just play himself.
That's ridiculous.
That's ridiculous, but that's what happens, you know. Every really famous gay role is played by straight actors.
But I'm not sure if that's why, actually. I think, first of all, you say an openly gay guy playing it. Until very recently, there hasn't been so many openly gay actors, and probably almost even for the actors themselves, gay actors who are not comfortable being open might themselves shy away from it. I think it's much more complicated than that. I mean,
yeah. Do you know the actor Matt Bomer? Matt Bomer is openly gay, and he auditioned for the title role in 50 Shades of Grey. He didn't get it, but I thought it would be wonderful if a gay man played this, you know, fantasy of so many girls and women, right? It would be acting. It would be acting.
Plus, I think we should be, asking those questions not just of actors, but also directors, screenwriters. I mean, in a sense, it seems more important for us that the people those who decide what the story will be, that they have the ability to tell the stories that would more accurately reflect the experience of the subjects.
But it's fantastic that the discussion on those topics is going on, because just several, like 2 years ago, we had this movie, Dallas Buyers Club, in which, what was the name of this actor? Jared Leto. He won an Oscar for playing a transgender woman, right? And there was a big discussion within the community and outside the community too, that he's just a cisgender male playing a trans character, so let's discuss it, right? And Laverne Cox, I think, opened the door for more trans actors.
I was thinking, first of all, with the Dallas Buyers Club, what was problematic was probably here's this hetero man dying of AIDS, probably first really big Hollywood representation of the struggle with AIDS.
After Tom Hanks.
So
after
that's problematic. But I was thinking about one more thing. I think that there's on a very basic level, and especially early on, when first gay and lesbian films were appearing, or series, there was this desire, first of all, after a complete lack of visibility, I think that there was this desire for some sort of mimetic representation, for this desire that all of these lesbians in the L word, like most of them are lesbian, and they're kind of playing themselves. And I remember when I said to my heterosexual daughter that Shane, if you've seen that word, you will know.
You know Shane? Shane is a lesbian icon from the serious L Word.
When I told her that Shane, the actress that plays Shane, is not a lesbian, my heterosexual was, don't tell me that! She said, no! So she's now? Yeah. I have to tell her. Yes! I know it! I always knew it! She
yes! All right, would anybody like to add something about the movies or LGBT issues in the movies?
Can I say something about the recent film? I'm going to be discussing this film in my class in January, I guess, when we return. It's a film by Ina Sachs, and it's a recent film from 2014. It's called love is strange. And this kind of goes back to the original questions that you were posing about marriage. It's a story about two elderly white middle-class men, not very well off, who live in New York, and they get married because it's now become possible for them to be married. And they have this sort of happy ceremony with family in attendance, everyone supporting their decision. And then one of them loses his job because he's now married to a man.
Yeah.
And he works for a Catholic school as a teacher of music, and he's fired because he has now violated the terms of his employment with this Catholic school. And so everyone has known all along that he's gay, but now that he's sort of officially announced that he's marrying a man, this has become a kind of public problem at that school that cannot be swept under the carpet any longer. And so they end up without money, and then they end up homeless and so on. There's a whole story that follows. And it's an interesting film because it actually kind of illustrates that to have marriage doesn't simply answer even the problems of those that are not the minority subjects that we've been talking about. And that unless you have non-discrimination clauses in the law that prevent discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and employment or housing, maybe that marriage in itself isn't yet the kind of final stage. And so this is a kind of interesting complication. Speaking of films, I just wanted to bring this up. You mentioned earlier, of course, that you said that you believe that even if people don't want to be married, they should have the right to. Yeah, this is one argument. Of course, another argument is that marriage in itself will be kind of discriminatory because not everyone will want to be married, and they will not enjoy the privileges, tax breaks, and so etc. that come with marriage, possibly. So, I mean, there is such a host of issues here. We haven't said anything about bisexuals, for example. We always say LGBTI and kind of forget what the B stands for even. No one talks about it in any way that I can think of. So there's such a host of, I just want to say there's such a host of issues that are so sort of, intangible almost.
Yeah. And the letter I is new in LGBTI. Yeah. Do you have any? Yes.
I just want to say on the idea of social construct, that gender is a social construct. I watched, I think a lot of trans people kind of reinforce the idea between gender and between female and male, because I remember watching a documentary, BBC documentary about trans kids, and I remember always when they are asked how do they know they are transgender, they always kind of say that, when I was a little boy, I always liked to play with Barbies. So I think this idea kind of, and I think a lot of trans people answer this question this way, that, I always did this super feminine or super masculine thing. And it kind of reinforces the divide between female and male, which we were talking about, that we should abolish this.
Well, absolutely. I think first, maybe these interviews that we tend to see on YouTube or something about coming out or how did you know, that's a beginning of a part of the discussion. So again, when I was chatting with Victor about this, I think for some people, gender dysphoria is something very serious. And again, especially when you grow up in a social construct, we can't avoid that says you're a boy or a girl, pick one, and you don't feel like that. Then so yeah, I think for a lot of people the discussion starts with like, I feel wrong. I'm not. It doesn't make sense. So on one hand, you're right. Like and when I was talking with Victor, he said, okay, yes, there's some people. There's a group of people in the trans community who would happily get rid of gender identity, but there's actually a lot of transgender people who want to be identified as a woman.
Yes.
Exactly. And if I may, when I said why would Mariusz pick this as a hot topic for trans music? Because it's a kind of sexy, catchable, nice topic for a cisgender person. Whereas, like, homelessness, transgender violence. You know, there's a lot of other stuff that in the trans community, okay, it's a discussion. It's something that's like, you know, of course, especially like I said, for you know, intersex babies having surgeries or people with sterilizations. Those are, you know, very real and very important kind of issues. But in terms of like hot trans topics, it's not as cool and sexy and easy to get behind. Of like, how do we stop trans people being murdered on the streets of Dallas? You know.
I mean, there's the possibility of transitioning in a medical and legal sense in the US is relatively recent. It really kind of goes back to the 1960s, I think, in most parts. There were perhaps some earlier moments, but I mean, in Europe that had been sort of there already for about 2 decades, and then in the States there are clinics that open, you know, on the West Coast, for example, in the 60s. There's a wonderful documentary called "Screaming Queens," Riots at the Constant Cafeteria by Susan Stryker and forget the other name of the other director, but one of the things that happened in this film is that Stryker is interviewing a number of transgender people. They're all M2F, and what they are saying uniformly is that they were seen by everyone as people who did not belong to any category at all. That they were essentially like you know, kind of hybrid monsters. They were perverts. They did not have identities. Period. They seemed inhuman. They could not find jobs. Most of them, unless they could perform on stage, and only a few could for all kinds of reasons, they would prostitute themselves in order to make a living in some way. They could not leave the district in which they were living because it was too dangerous. Okay, it was dangerous in the district, but it was even more dangerous to leave that dangerous district because they would get beat up and the police would stop them and so on. And so they uniformly testify in this documentary that to actually have this category of the transsexual at the time was that which made it possible for them to have a document that stated this, that they would obtain at the clinic, that it became possible for some people in the police force to use this term and to stop, you know, persecution on the basis that now there is a kind of explanation for who those people are. They're not just, you know, perverted hooligans, but in fact they are transsexual, and they could finally get jobs and they could get the procedure and so on and so forth. So you know, I don't know that it is necessarily the case that all of them were suffering from the kind of gender dysphoria where you have to transition in order to be at peace with yourself, etc. But it was the case that given the circumstances in which they were living, it was far preferable to have an identity category that was relatively clear and that was legible to themselves and to others, as opposed to not having it. So, you know, I mean, I think this may, of course, you know, today that may be a different story in a place like New York. I think there are many people who, you know, who prefer not to define their gender identity in a clear manner, but they live in a very, very different legal and social context from the one that was there, you know, 50 years ago. And it's very interesting to, you know, to look at this. And so I mean, I think it's. I just wanted to throw in this example that.
Yeah. But still, usually schools have a boys and a girls toilet, and people decide which they want to go into, and.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the trans visibility is like, okay. So I would say, like some of it, again, the social construct, occasionally I've been somewhere where there's a kind of like, these bathrooms have sanitary bins and these ones you can stand up in, choose. But usually it's, especially in schools, you know, again, so for trans teenagers who are getting beaten up or told that they can't go into the right one,
it is slowly changing too. Yeah, very slow. But I myself, I saw the all-gender restroom in the airport in San Diego, for example.
Yeah.
Or the professor of a university in Washington said that he was fighting like for several years, and finally he won the battle to have all-gender restrooms in the premises of the university. So. Yeah, it's changing. But I would also like to add something about how legal system influences the identity. For example, recently there has been a research in UK just a simple one, like how do you define yourself sexually? And there was a scale, like you know, the Dr. Kinsey type scale. I think 6 grades, like 6 you are 100% heterosexual and 0 for 100 homosexual, and it turned out that I think 49% of young people in Great Britain said that they are not number 6. They are not 100% heterosexual. So majority is not 100 heterosexual. It's a revolution. Of course, you know, most of them said they were number 5 or number 4. So they are mostly straight, but not 100%. And I think this possibility, this let's call it lack of homophobia, or in inverted commas, encouraged them to be more open about their sexuality. And I think it's more or less the same case maybe with the trans people. Like in places, in countries where the trans rights are the most advanced, like Argentina or Malta or Denmark, when the process of legal transition is just administrative one. Not that you don't go to court. You go to some administrative office and you say, I'm a girl. And that's it. You don't have to do any, you know, you don't have to see a doctor. It's by, you define yourself and they change your documents. And it influences the identity of trans people. There was, yeah.
Yes, and what happens to such a person, for example, if he or she goes, I know, to jail or something?
That's a great question. You mean in Argentina?
For example, or in Denmark?
Yeah, it's based on their definition. So if she defines as a girl, and if she goes to prison, she goes to prison with the other women.
And it's not checked in any way, well, in this, you know, in this office or so?
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't know.
So, for example, I know, for example, a male can go to this office or something and say he's a woman and go the next day to the jail with women? Is it
Maybe,
possible?
I don't know. It's an interesting question, yeah. But the general question about the trans people in prison, we've had, at least I've read about several cases of trans women trying to commit suicide or actually commit suicide while being put in a male prison. Yeah.
I was thinking, you call up these, you talk about data and questionnaires, and I was thinking that those, of course, it's not just even a matter of interpretation, but those in themselves are somewhat problematic, in the sense that, you know, how do you calculate whether you're a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4? Doesn't it change from, if not day to day, then, you know, different times in your life? And I would not be able really to assign myself to a number in this way, probably.
Well, it's up to you.
Also data, and also, you know, the collections of data. What I'm saying is that we have to be also very cautious about how knowledge is produced, and not necessarily depend on the kind of scientific, because not only they can be skewed, they depend on interpretation, and they also often ask questions which are not really answerable. And of course it depends on how you also design the questionnaire in terms of who.
Yeah, I mean, one simple way to illustrate this would be, you know, like in the Kinsey study, the question that was posed was, you know, did you have sex with a person of your own gender? You know, that kind of logic, which is behavioral, which is one way to
it's a different thing.
To determine. But then you could also ask, you know, what if someone has not had sex yet, right? Or what if they are having sex with one gender but are having fantasies about having sex with the other gender? So depending on how the question is posed, you will get different statistical results. And so I don't really know what the methodology was in the study which you are...
Well, it was based on self-definition, and it is a research that is done for years. and it shows, you know, the result is funny because it shows that there, you know, gay people multiply.
And not because we're recruiting.
Another way to talk about this would be that those labels that we are using, I mean, we're using a host of different labels: transsexual, transgender, gay, and so on. And you know, I mean, those are, and we can keep saying social constructionists, you know, constructionists in here, but those are historical labels. The word gay was not used in the way in which we are using it in the 1960s, for example. It just didn't, you know, have that meaning. And so, that is to say also that maybe 20 years from now, we are not going to be using that word. That it will be replaced by not just another word, but other categories in which to think about sexuality. And I think this is very, very likely, which actually poses a very interesting question about how rights need to be defined. Because if you're going to give rights to categories that will then disappear, that seems futile somehow.
Or multiply, and which is what is happening, right? There used to be a gay movement, then it turned out that there's also a tiny little lesbian movement, so it was a gay and lesbian movement, and then we added other letters to it. And of course, the way we multiply is never going to stop. So you're absolutely right that that giving rights to one of the letters is highly problematic.
Yes.
Except that, like, if you go back to kind of what Obama said, it's like, it's not about assigning rights to you or you and your friends. It's about removing discrimination. It's not about, like, who gets the rights. It's like, like, theoretically, in an ideal world, we would just say, like, you can't mess with me just because I am blank.
But it's not enough.
Yeah.
That's not enough.
I know, but I'm just saying, like,
discrimination even by producing laws.
Because, I mean,
of course, I know, but I'm just saying, like, the kind of rights, it's like, actually, it's not, like, okay, the kind of, even, you know, the gay marriage rights, it's not about giving gay people rights to marriage, it's about removing the discrimination of gays not being able to get married.
Yeah, but I would add to that, though, that there's also the law regarding protected groups, and you have to face the fact that if you removed all of the references to, you know, race and everything from the laws, as Christina said, you still have the discrimination, you still have people being fired for being gay. So you have the protected groups laws to prevent them from being fired for being gay. Now, you're right, that can spiral out of control so that you're protecting every group and you've got 30 different laws. But, I mean, most of those laws have gotten there for a good reason. And eventually they may be able to go away, but in the short run, I don't think so.
Yeah, but it's a good question. I mean, you know, can we envision a way of having either statutory laws or a common law based on precedent, which would not either explicitly or implicitly, you know, kind of be based on a list of protected groups that are protected against discrimination. This is not a question that I know the answer to, but I think that is a very interesting question. And when we talk about identity and a kind of queering off and getting rid of identity, this is a kind of, you know, main question that should be addressed, I think. Can we do this without calling on identity categories?
Yeah, of course. Well, this is the problem with Judith Butler and the feminists, right? Who were complaining that Judith Butler is taking away the woman that they're fighting for. If you don't have a woman, if you have genders that are simply performative, then it really disables. You can only strategically assume this lesbian or, you know, female position to fight for something. So.
All right. Are there any questions, or we're going to another topic?
Maybe you should tell us what you've prepared, because you
tell
us. It's so frustrating when you prepare something and then you don't get to say it.
Religion. So, same-sex marriage created a lot of backlash, and especially in Indiana. And Pamela wrote an article about what happened in Indiana this year, of course. And could you tell us something about, you know, giving the example, like, you know?
About the pizza parlor.
Yeah, or florists, or.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's in general, okay,
Yeah.
this is when I said before, it's like, okay, it's great to have the right to marry, but it opens the floodgates to people being freaked out about people being able to marry, is that after, in June, when it was possible to get married, then there were quite a lot of people in quite a lot of places that said, well, I don't want to take part in that. And so they started calling on their religious freedom to say, my religion doesn't agree with that, so I don't want to bake you a cake for your wedding. If two lesbians come in and order a cake, then I'm not going to do it. So there's some situation in the bakery in Oregon. The piece that started off the article that I wrote was about a pizza parlor in Indiana, and some of it's like because there is not an anti-discrimination law that is across the states. Than each state at the moment, and I think there's only like 22 states that have, or 19. It's actually quite small. It's like less than half of the states actually have an inclusive anti-discrimination law that says that you can't discriminate. Mm-hmm. So there isn't anything like this in Indiana, and so it was kind of pushed through the Religious Freedom Act. I can't remember, it was a while ago that I wrote this article. and it said that customers, that businesses could, if they wanted to, if it was like a big strain on their religion, then they could refuse to serve you because you're gay. And so, again, kind of like news everywhere, but especially in the States, some little tiny pizza parlor, a dad and his daughter in a tiny town in Indiana said, I'm not going to serve, I'm not going to, if gays ordered pizza for their wedding, I wouldn't do it. Apart from the fact that a lot of people were like, who's going to order some pizza for their wedding, right? But again, it got picked up, it kind of went viral, it was like this huge thing. So first, people were boycotting and sending letters, and they were like, oh, we're so afraid that they closed down. Then somebody started a GoFundMe campaign. They earned $800,000 in a week or so, which probably was orchestrated, okay, but to help them out in their time of stress because they had to go undercover because of their religious beliefs.
Yeah.
So this kind of kicked off a bunch of, and this is the interesting part, is it kicked off a bunch of big businesses who said, we don't want to do business with Indiana. If the governor is not going to protect the rights of my employees in Indiana, if that's what they're basing, then we're not going to do business with you. And still the case is open. It's still an interesting thing. There's still the fact that there isn't, what it actually kickstarted was the Equality Act is kind of pushing for there to be, like someone kind of went, oh gosh, we don't have one of these, do we? And it kind of raised the visibility again, and that's what happens is that the visibility is raised, the discussion gets hot, and now there's a push to make it so that that you can't use religion as a blanket for being able to refuse service to somebody because you don't agree with them. Because we were like, what? That could be even. It was interesting also a lot of other religious groups, Jewish groups, Muslim groups, were coming and saying like, wait a minute, if you say that you can discriminate based on your religious beliefs of what you will sell to someone or not, apart from being terribly un-American, because it's so capitalist, it again, opens this floodgate of badness.
Yes. I was going to say that it's like abortion in Poland, that doctors can refuse.
Yeah, it's essentially like a consciousness clause. A consciousness clause of like, I don't want to take part in your gayness.
Yeah, but there are no businesses in Poland that will try to react to it. And of course, nothing, nobody will organize because that's part of the problem. So the beginning was the same, but then everything that came up.
Yeah.
But does it boil down to this choice? Well, what's more important, religious beliefs or sexual orientation or non-discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation? Because it's like,
what's the political analysis?
Yeah.
Of what it boils down to?
Yeah, because for me, at the end of the day, it's like, what's more important, your religion or my sexual orientation? Because you say you're a florist, you sell flowers, and I'm gay and I want to have a wedding with my boyfriend, and I come to you and I ask for flowers for my big gay wedding, and you say, I'm not going to sell you these flowers because you're gay, because my religion doesn't allow me to sell you those flowers. And the law, what does law say? Does law say you're gay, you are allowed to buy flowers from her, or does the law say you are fundamentally Catholic, you are allowed not to sell flowers to him?
Well, in Indiana, Mike Pence is the nice man who pushed this through. Just swore up and down. It was such a funny, viral little video that he swore this had nothing to do with discrimination. It was just about religious freedom. But it's also like when you say like, what's more important? After you come in and say, if you come in and said you're gay, it's like, how do I know you're gay? First of all, that's one of the things. Is like, why is it a big deal about marriages? Because suddenly it's like, oh, because I'm ordering a wedding
because
cake.
I want this cake to be, MARIUSZ and Przemysł.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
And it just, for me, it's so scarily smacks of like, also like, you're black, you can't eat here.
It does, and I think that what the courts have said about this is that there is nothing inherently religious about making a floral arrangement, or, God forbid, making a pizza.
Yeah.
And that you cannot claim that it violates your religious beliefs because you're making a pizza for somebody that you, for some reason, don't like.
Also, like,
I think that's pretty much what they've said.
Yeah, if I was atheist and I said I'm atheist, and so I'm not going to make anything for Hanukkah. I'm not going to make. If you come in and say I want this, it just again, it's just a big
badness. Yes.
Oh, this is not pizza badness. We go back to the floodgates of badness.
The courts have moved in to protect people who work for religious organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's still an open body of law in the United States right now. If you work, for example, for a Catholic hospital, does that hospital have the right to determine, for example, that contraception may not be part of your medical plan? And that kind of thing has not been decided yet.
Would anybody like to add something on religious freedom or sexual freedom?
And buying stuff.
Or buying stuff for your weddings. Yeah.
I would say something. I'm having a problem with this medicine argument, but I never understood all this mess with buying and selling, and because we're talking about gay and lesbian people here, but there are places where don't allow people with dogs or with babies or whatever. I think that this is really a mistake of the liberal movement to do that. Because we had a similar case in Poland with one company, a beer company, had this Czech thing, right? And there was a huge boycott, and I was okay, cool, fine. But then people who are homophobic started buying this beer.
Yes.
So it actually makes the business of that person grow.
Yeah.
And I never understood this because I always thought that if I have a business and I'm an atheist, and I don't want to sell anybody to any religion, like why should anyone force me to sell anything to anybody else?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Why, if I don't want to sell to gay people, sure, why not? Then I may open another store and say exclusively to gay people. I mean, I wouldn't go into this. I think this is dangerous, and because it may end up ridiculous, because we may end up having a law that will require all the restaurant owners to allow people with cats, but then people want to go with rats, and it's like, this is spiraling too much. Like, I would leave that alone.
Yeah.
This business issue. Like, if you don't want to sell to somebody, sure, don't. There's another store which will open up just for you, which you can do. I just don't understand. I have a problem with the medical thing, because I understand that if a hospital can tell you that you cannot come here because you're gay.
You assume that in every town there are florists who have open minds.
But no. My main argument is that
there are those who are religious, and there are those who will happily sell flowers to gay people. And in some cases, there may be just one flower shop in a tiny town.
Yeah, I know. I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, but my main idea is that it really this is obviously something bad, but it really it backfires, and it allows the people who do that to profit. And then
That's the case.
my good strategy, if I want to sell beer in Poland, say, or in a conservative state, I'll say, oh, I don't serve gay people, and people will give me money and stuff. And it's like, why do that? Why feed those people with that?
Yeah, but now imagine you're gay and you have a boyfriend and you want to get married and you want to buy flowers in your town, and you can't.
Well, then, again, I'm not getting.
That's why I told you. That's why I asked you to imagine that. And suddenly you can't buy flowers. You can't find the venue.
But from my perspective, I would prefer to rather go to a different town to buy flowers rather than making this florist, who is obviously an asshole, earn money because people will come to him especially for that. Because then there will be people from other towns coming especially to him because he's.
But don't you think you would feel a little bit discriminated against? That you would,
well, I would.
Okay, I'm gay, so I can't have wedding in my town.
Well, of course I would, but for me that's a practical question. I really never understood this about selling and buying this thing. If I don't want to sell to somebody, why not make it positive?
Well, I think that there are maybe two issues that are kind of again kind of possible to tease out from this. Well, one is of course the nature or the kind of philosophy of liberalism, and it is clearly in some. Well, it is, I guess, kind of illiberal to have this sort of, law that prevents private businesses from discriminating on the basis of whatever they believe, whether it's religion or something else is kind of immaterial here. As opposed to government doing this, right? I mean, that would be the distinction for liberalism. And of course, the solution that was adopted with the Civil Act, was to actually force businesses to cater to people regardless of race. And so that brings me to the second point, but the second point is to do with identity, really. I mean, this is why identity categories still matter. And you just whispered this. I mean, I was going to repeat what Pamela said, but she said, you can leave your cat at home, but not your blackness or your gayness. In other words, there is a kind of difference. And of course, that difference, I mean, I can see how your argument how your argument is that there has to be a more or less arbitrary line that is drawn somewhere. And it's clearly, with Civil Rights Act or with this kind of anti-discrimination clauses in the law, there is a line that is drawn more or less arbitrarily somewhere. But I mean, the logic of that line being drawn is, I think, grounded in this concept of identity or protected groups. In other words, those people, because of their right to their dignity, basically, that right to dignity overrules or overrides the right of the business owner to conduct his business the way that they might want to. So there is clearly a kind of conflict, and moreover, there is a way in which the government does interfere with private property rights in doing this, no question. But it's sort of it's motivated or it's justified.
I heard about one case of a gay couple living in Poland and preparing for immigration to Malta, and same-sex civil unions are already legal in Malta, and they wanted to have weddings in Malta, but they wanted to print the invitations for their wedding in Poland, and they couldn't because all the printers would refuse. When they happily got the orders, but when they found out that the invitation is about two men, they refused.
Why did they refuse? Do you know? I mean, were they afraid that this is some kind of media provocation?
Of course, they didn't tell them. They didn't give grounds. Suddenly, after seeing the invitation in the email to be printed, suddenly they said, "Oh, I'm too busy. I can't take this order. Sorry," and they wouldn't keep the conversation. End of story.
It's also, I think, in some ways a case of scale. Maybe when you're thinking about, this just one couple that can get pizza somewhere in Indiana, but it was just about not serving men in glasses and in brown coats and and bluish shirts, then we can deal with it. But if it was not just this, but your entire family, then it becomes more problematic. Then if it's not like an entire race, then it's even more problematic. I'm not sure if we can really, think that if the problem is kind of little, you just travel to another town and, because, you don't want to feed somebody else's, it's illogical. You're not going to feed the bad guys, so you're just going to step back. But I don't think it works like this.
Yeah, I mean, the situation that you were describing is exactly what pertained to the United States racially and probably regarding gays up to the 1960s, 1970s. And the government simply decided, or governments of various states and the federal government, that there was a greater social good in interfering with private property rights. Because it wasn't just a question of serving someone, it was a question of employment, it was a question of sale of houses where people could live. It had huge implications across the society. It wasn't just one person buying a pizza. But the same laws apply to both of those situations, whether you're talking about redlining entire black communities out of certain parts of living in American cities, or this one person who wants to get flowers for their wedding. It's all the same thing.
But I mean, exactly, scale is why I'm raising this question, because in a country like Poland, that is seriously a problem. But in a country like America, which is far more advanced than Poland, that's not a problem to find a florist to do that. So
that's
in this,
true everywhere, though. I mean, I don't know about florists that much, but I remember driving across New Mexico and Arizona 2 summers ago, and finding it very difficult to find like a grocery store that would carry fresh vegetables, for example. So we tend to think of America in terms of, the places that we usually visit, which would be big cities and so on. But indeed, you can go next door. You can go to, I shopped for my wedding band in New York some years ago, and I could go from door to door, in 48th Street and just ask. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true for everyone. So I think that one has to keep in mind that there are, there may be, like Mariusz was suggesting, a shop where, where if you want to get the wedding cake or the arrangement somewhere else, you need to drive 30 miles. So that, that becomes a kind of practical problem.
Yeah, it's not just a practical problem. I think it's a larger problem. I think it's right to say until every gay couple can get served, we should be striving to make the law to that effect. And it's true with every, I think, oppressed community that until there's no single member of that community that will be refused service or discriminated.
if I may rephrase my question then, because what Dr. Basiuk said about identity, of course I understand that having a dog is much more different than being gay or lesbian or black. But then my question would be, in that case, where do we draw a line of what constitutes a vital part of your identity and what does not constitute a vital part of it? Because that's the basic, right? I mean, if we all agree that obviously sexuality is the basic part of your identity, right? Just like race, etc., etc. I mean, yeah. But then where do we draw the line? Because, if there is no line, then having a dog may be a part of your identity one time. And this is the spiral that appears in my mind when I think of that is just, it's too big.
Yeah, but
so is there a line? I mean, that's just I don't know the answer, just my question.
There isn't a line that is pre-drawn, that is there, from the beginning. It isn't given a priori, right? I mean, we don't know what the line will be in the end. We know what the line is today. And this is decided by the courts, and it's decided by legislators and so on. And that has always been the case. And so, I mean, I can kind of understand this kind of, you're making this kind of slippery slope argument. And this argument is, the argument of the spiral is kind of based on, I don't mean to say this about you personally, but it's based on this kind of logic of the panic, of a kind of moral panic, that this will take us to some place where we don't want to be. And of course, I mean, in terms of just a kind of chain of associations, that seems logical. But that is not what actually happens. What actually happens is that you have, have policy decisions which are taken by, like I said, legislators or judges, in every instance. And so we don't actually have a kind of free-fall situation, but rather there is always, blockage or stoppage or a kind of balance that is being negotiated in some way.
And how do you say what's the defining part? If you're not gay and you're not black, these are the two examples that you use. does anything define your identity? What's the defining thing about your identity? What defines your identity?
Well,
No,
again,
I'm asking you.
that's the question. Me?
Yeah,
There
because
are-
how do you ask of anyone to define their identity on the basis of one thing that they are?
Well, that's exactly the point. How many things can go into that category, which is vital for your identity? I mean, for me,
What?
for me, being white or Polish doesn't matter. It's not a part of my identity of who I am, right? Or I don't know. My identity is not based on my sexuality. That's something else for me. But then, you know, where's yeah.
I think those definitions, I mean, identity is strange also because identity is a marking. It's, in a sense, identity connects, not in every single case, but most often connects to something like objection or something like discrimination or something that is negative, in fact. So in other words, you don't necessarily think of your identity as Polish or just your sexuality because it's not being challenged, because you're not running into specific barriers where that identity becomes becomes something that you have to struggle to preserve and so on. So I think that is the, so this is, when we talk about identity in relation to this class of people, in the sense of the protagonist, class of people, we are talking about identity categories where people do run into very practical obstacles because of that identity. So it's a very narrow understanding of identity in that sense.
If you were forced to act gay, you would feel very straight immediately, probably.
Yeah, I thought about this, when you said that, I thought about now what's happening in Poland, challenging my, and I agree that I was convinced.
Okay, so is anybody adding something to this point of discussion?
But we should probably be kind of, we should be, concluding at some point.
Okay, at some point. I don't have a feel what's the time?
It's behind
An hour and a half.
All right.
Can you maybe talk about Kim Davies?
Yeah, I was
A
going
little bit.
Okay.
That was in the invitation.
Okay, 10 minutes and we are concluding, okay? Okay, Kim Davies?
Yeah.
Who wants to talk about Kim Davies?
Hopefully she will not be Person of the Year.
Now she's anti-gay icon, right? In this year.
I mean, I think it's Kim Davis after she lives in Kentucky.
She's a clerk?
She's a clerk. So she's a publicly appointed person. She's not. It's harder for her to lose her job. And after the nationwide, gay marriage is allowed, she refused. She said, and this is again, she's refusing on the basis of religion to issue marriage certificates to gay people. She did that for a while. She was told to do it, to stop and do your job. She went to jail for 5 days based on contempt of court, because she went to court, and she turned into like a celebrity. I mean, this is also someone who's been married 4 times to 3 different men, who's I wouldn't exactly say that she's a model of ethic purity.
Christian poster girl.
but usually not who is, right? So this is another example, again, more in a kind of public sphere, in a kind of public service sphere, of someone who tried to say, like, I will refuse to do my job because it goes against my religious beliefs. And, she went to jail for 5 whole days.
So she's a martyr too?
And when she came out, it was huge. She managed to meet the Pope and tried to orchestrate it to look like the Pope wanted to talk to her. The Pope later issued a press release to say, I didn't know who this person was. Right? So that's but still, she's a tool of the religious right. And she's a now celebrity. But I just recently read, because I heard that she was like on the list for Times Person of the Year.
Oh yeah.
And hopefully she's down in the polls. So when you were talking about like, well, why don't we just let why do we mention these things, and why don't we just let the open market run itself through? In this case, a little bit. Okay, she had her 15 minutes in the sun, and there's a chance that hopefully she will be leaving the press cycle, because she was ordered to go back to her job. She was moved to a different section. She wasn't fired.
She still works in this.
Yeah, because it's like, she has a harder time being fired because she's publicly appointed. But she basically she agreed to do her job if she didn't have to deal with this. And it's like that. If someone really, really, really says, I can't touch meat, right? Like, I'm a vegetarian, I cannot touch meat. Okay, don't get a job touching meat.
Yes.
And if you were, dealing with tofu and suddenly your job dealt with meat, then somehow it would suck if you had to lose your job, right? But maybe you can figure out how to move to a clerical position where you don't have to touch meat. Or whatever. I'm just saying, like, there's always options, and she was not looking for those options, she was looking for a headline.
To clarify, publicly appointed in this instance means she was elected. She was elected in a county-wide election.
Yeah.
Well, this is of course a kind of transitional moment in the sense that when she was elected, there wasn't same-sex marriage, right? And then she was sort of made to or put in a position where she was expected to perform those ceremonies. So I would imagine that this kind of situation will actually perhaps not arise again for that reason. In other words, if someone, we'll see, but I mean, if someone were to expect that would be part of the job description, they might not want to run for that position or to seek appointment. But I also want to say that this is a very, very different situation from the ones that we've talked about, the pizza situation. I mean, on the one hand side, we have private business. On the other hand side, we have the government. That's a whole different discussion. And so this whole question of liberalism and property rights doesn't even enter into this. It's a very different framework. Where she's a really big professional.
So now I have to be very quick. I just want to say that this year in June, it was in April, that President Obama appointed the special envoy for human rights for LGBTI people, and that's the new post in Obama administration. That's never, it's the first time, and it was Randy Berry who was appointed. Randy Berry was in Poland, and I had the chance to interview him. And I would like to ask you if this appointment of President Obama is a signal, because he's a special envoy. So is this a signal to the rest of the world that for USA, LGBTI rights matter not only in USA, but outside also? And what implication does it have?
But it's not the first signal of this kind. I mean, clearly the cooperation that we are sort of, witnessing to today is another signal. And so, and that has been the position of the State Department for some time now, that is interested in promoting LGBTI rights across the world, not just in the US. So sure, but it's not. It's also not the first.
Yeah, but it's advancement.
Yes. I mean, especially the fact that he speaks Spanish, he speaks Arabic. He's a white boy who grew up on a cattle ranch. He's married with 2 kids. He's like your
married to a man.
Yeah, married to a man with 2 kids. That he's openly gay. That he's been posted in Uganda twice, and where else was it? That he's Egypt. So he's been posted in a lot of different countries, but particularly countries that are very aggressively anti-gay. So he's not wet behind the ears. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to talk to people about this issue, and so he's a pretty good poster child. For like, hey, we're normal, get over it.
Okay. So the last question. Okay. The last question would be: Are you ready for Hillary?
Are you ready for Hillary?
No, please don't.
Oh my God.
I like Bernie Sanders.
Okay, so what's for us in the future?
In the stage.
Because next year when we meet here, it will be after the election.
Bernie, would I be voting? Which I don't do because I haven't lived there for such a long time, and I prefer to vote in Poland. But it's not just about Hillary. But okay, when I was like, okay, what about gays and the 2016 election? And I saw that the Organization for Marriage, the National Organization for Marriage, which is secretly funded by Catholics, surprise, surprise, asked all the presidential candidates to say that to get behind their initiative to repeal gay marriage and to get rid of all the marriages that have happened. Also to not promote gayness in schools or even the idea of anything other than normal marriages. And again, to protect people's religious right to discriminate. So this is a pretty bold thing to ask candidates to sign up to. Basically, they're promising that if I become elected, then I'm going to do all these things. And 4 of the Republican candidates signed it. 4, yeah.
Only? Out of 12?
Yeah, there's like a million of them. I thought they're multiplying Rick Santorum, Ted Cruz, Ben Carson, and Bobby Jindal. Hopefully none of them are. You can say that maybe none of them would get elected, but then again, Ted Cruz. It's not even important like who's on top and what it is. It's just the fact that as part of this whole idea about LGBT issues in general and the elections, that's kind of one side of it. But I also, and then I oddly read that out of all the Republican candidates anyway, that Donald Trump is the most LGBT friendly. And there's actually some openly gay guy in San Diego, actually in California, has started a Gays for Trump site or movement or something, right? I mean, I'm not sure it reminds me of when I was chatting with Victor about this, he sent me, it's like American Dad, it's like South Park, there's like kind of, we're red and we're gay. So even though it's kind of laughable, I guess what to me it says is that you can't talk about the LGBTI community and the elections because there's a lot of people, right?
In San Francisco, there was a group that produced shirts, I would bottom for Hillary.
Yeah, that's another discussion. But what I think in general, like no matter what people are supporting, because also Caitlin Jennings is completely Republican. And like not so long ago, Bette Midler was really, having a go at her, saying, "How can you be Republican? How can you support any of those candidates who will not fight for you?"
She said, Bette Midler said, I identify Kathleen Jenner as uninformed.
Yeah, she said it's like basically it's like as Republican, it's like uninformed, but. So I suppose in one way it's good that it's not just like, oh, if you're gay, you're going to vote for this person. It's not so easy, but for sure, whoever is elected is going to really, again, kind of so much has happened in the last 2 terms to push forward, whether it's the special envoy, whether it's, turning the White House rainbow after the judicial elections. There's so many signs from the White House in one direction, and whoever is next elected is really going to push it more in one direction, or they're going to quite possibly try to backpedal. Although again, the weird thing about Donald Trump is that he has said, I don't think it should even be called marriage, or I don't want to talk about it. Basically, I mean that's why Trump is the most LGBT-friendly candidate, is because basically he doesn't want to talk about it. And he doesn't think it should be a topic, which is the best of the candidates. That's the best he gets in the Republican list. Is I don't want to talk about it, so
Okay.
But Gays for Trump, just really like that. It seemed like a South Park episode,
Would you like to add something? Not just about Hillary or Donald Trump, about anybody.
Sum up.
Or Bernie Sanders, yes.
Yeah.
Well, to sum up, are we? Is the U.S. closer to LGBT paradise now than last year?
If you're a teenager on the streets, no. Homelessness, trans violence. I mean, of course, paradise is a long ways away.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. If you don't have any more questions,
It gets better.
even for teenagers.
It gets better. There's more organizations out there.
Okay. Thank you very much.